Hey guys, it's Bellamy here from Midnight Suns, and recently I just heard that the Ahsoka TV series, the streaming series on Disney Plus, the new Star Wars series, I heard that the viewership numbers were actually really low. Like low as Endor. I think it was something like 1.2 million or something like that, the viewership numbers for the first episode, and then the second episode dropped to even lower than that, like below 1 million. And I was actually talking to some of my friends about it, and because I had a lot of things to say about it, I thought I'd just make this video and upload it to YouTube as well. So if anybody's watching this, you are one of the few people who are watching it. So I don't know who's gonna watch this, but if you are watching this, thank you. So I do have quite a number of things to say about this. So first off, let me just say I am a massive Star Wars fan. Like ever since I was a kid, even before I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, I joined this local, because I'm in Singapore, so there's this local Star Wars forum. I think it was called Star Wars Singapore or something like that. Yeah. And I spent quite a number of years there. This was way before Facebook and everything. Yeah. So I was really hugely into Star Wars even before social media existed. And I know even back then when people didn't like the prequel trilogy, even then the merchandise sales for the prequel trilogy were amazing, like Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. Like even back then the toys were everywhere and they weren't like, except maybe Phantom Menace, I remember seeing some of the unwanted figures on clearance like Watto and Jar Jar Binks. But after the Phantom Menace, like even though as much as people complain about like the prequel trilogy, I remember the sales for those toys were still amazing, even though the movies were not regarded by many as being that good, even though now when people look back at it, they realize how good the prequel trilogy actually was. And the reason I'm telling you about all that is because I've noticed that ever since Disney acquired Lucasfilm, which was in was it 2012 or something, yeah, but since The Force Awakens onwards, I've noticed the Star Wars fandom continuing to dwindle as each movie, each series comes out. And it just feels to me like there used to be this very huge public goodwill towards Star Wars, but now I don't feel that anymore. If you go on social media or any Reddit forum or anything, you will see a lot more Star Wars haters than fans. And I mean, a lot of it has to do with politics. I mean, especially in America. I mean, I'm in Singapore, so I'm separated from all the American politics mostly. Yeah, but I know a lot of people have issues with like all the woke ideologies being pushed in Disney movies, not just Star Wars, but like even Marvel and all that. But putting all that aside, I just noticed that generally there is a lot less public goodwill towards the franchise that there used to be. I remember last time, like even when The Force Awakens was coming out and before The Last Jedi came out, like the sales were through the roof. I remember at one point, like you know the Force FX lightsabers that used to be like a couple $100. At one point, like I remember Count Dooku and Asajj Ventress, their lightsabers were going for like over $1,000. There's no way you can get that much now. Yeah, but there was one point where the community had so much goodwill towards the franchise, the collectors were just willing to pay insane amounts of money for all the rare merchandise, the rare Star Wars merchandise. You don't really see that anymore nowadays. And you might be asking, what does any of that I just talked about for the past few minutes have anything to do with Ahsoka? Well, I guess if you ask me, I think everything is connected, you know? Like the reason why Ahsoka's viewership numbers are much lower than even like Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Kenobi series that came out last year, and lower than all the Mandalorian series is not because the Ahsoka series is worse than those. In fact, I actually think the Ahsoka series is pretty good. It's probably the best Disney Jedi story that we've gotten so far. Except, unless you count Luke's mini story in Mandalorian Season 2. But other than that, I think, and if you don't count the animated shows and if you do not count the video games, because Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor have way better stories, but if you put all that aside, if we just talk about full-length, live-action Star Wars, Ahsoka is easily the best Jedi story that we've gotten from Disney Star Wars in the past 10 years, easily, if you ask me. But yeah, I think the show is pretty good. Why are the numbers so low, the viewership numbers? I think it's really because people just don't really care about Star Wars anymore. I will never forget this. When I was in university, I think in 2018, right after The Last Jedi came out, because I was studying communications and new media, and I had a class on PR and marketing, and I remember that Star Wars The Last Jedi was actually used as a case study on how not to market a media franchise. So I don't want to go into all the politics, but in a nutshell, basically the people who made The Last Jedi, they made some very, how do you say this, controversial comments that really pissed off a lot of Star Wars fans on social media. And that was the turning point. Like, ever since then, Disney Star Wars viewership and merchandise sales have plummeted. And it's not that The Last Jedi was necessarily a bad movie. In fact, I would argue it's actually a good movie, but I guess maybe you could consider it a bad Star Wars movie. But if you just look at it as a science fiction movie, I actually thought it was pretty good. But yeah, I know that movie really pissed off a lot of Star Wars fans, and like I said earlier, I'm really connected with like the local Star Wars community, and I know a lot of people in Singapore. I can't speak for the rest of the world, apart from what I can see on social media, which kind of matches what I've seen in Singapore. But I know a lot of fans in Singapore really soured on Star Wars after The Last Jedi. And with each series, each movie that came out after The Last Jedi, you can just see the box office numbers and the viewership numbers just keep going lower and lower. Like Mandalorian season 1 and 2 were amazing, and then those are like the diamonds in the rough, and then the viewership for those shows really skyrocketed. But everything else, you can just kind of see it going downhill. Honestly, I actually think the show is pretty good, like I said earlier, but because fans, and not just Star Wars fans, but even the casual audience just doesn't really hold Star Wars in such a high regard anymore like they used to in the original trilogy and prequel trilogy days. And because of that, nobody's watching the show, and which is a real shame, because I actually think this is a really good show. I mean, yes, there are many things to complain about it. Like, for example, I would say the biggest problem with the show is that I think you really do need to be a hardcore Star Wars fan. Like, you really do need to know everything that happened in the Clone Wars and Rebels, the animated shows, to really appreciate the full scope of what's happening in Ahsoka, to really understand the characters and all their dynamics and all their backstories and everything. If you don't watch those two animated shows, which by the way are both amazing, I highly recommend watching both of them. But if you haven't watched, like, how many seasons is, like, I think like Clone Wars is like, was it like 7 seasons, and then Rebels is like 4 seasons or something. So like, if you don't watch like 11 seasons of animated shows, then you won't really fully appreciate what's happening in Ahsoka. But for the hardcore Star Wars fans who've watched everything and know all the lore and all that, like me, like, I really love Ahsoka so much. And yeah, it's really just such a shame that the show isn't having better viewership. But like I said, I don't think that's because the show is bad. And just to hit home the point that the low viewership doesn't really mean the show is bad, take a look at Andor. I actually think Andor is the best Star Wars product that Disney Star Wars has ever made, apart from Rogue One. Like, Andor and Rogue One, in like me judging from like a critical perspective as a film critic or even like as a TV critic, I think those two shows, the Rogue One movie and the Andor TV series, are peak Star Wars. I would even put them up against the original trilogy and prequel trilogy. That's how much I love Rogue One and Andor. And just look at Andor, like, even though it has like the ratings are, the critical ratings are through the roof, but the viewership ratings are just so low. And I mean, that just goes to show that even when you make a good Star Wars show nowadays, people might not watch it because people just simply don't care about Star Wars like they used to. And I think to a lesser extent, that's what's happening to the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well now. You just see all the MCU shows on Disney Plus just having lower and lower viewership numbers. And yeah, I've watched 3 episodes of Ahsoka already, and I loved all of them. And I really hope that the next half of the series really just hits a home run. If the show is really amazing, then hopefully, like, through word of mouth, more and more people will come and watch it. Especially after they watch Clone Wars and Rebels, if people are willing to care enough about Star Wars to go through everything and learn about Ahsoka, the character. Yeah, if people really go through her entire character arc and really appreciate her character growth and her whole journey, I think people will really love this show. But yeah, I kind of understand if people don't want to go through like 11 animated series just to get to Ahsoka and really understand her character and all that. But I don't think that is the main reason why the show has low viewership numbers. I really do think it's because the casual audience doesn't care so much about Star Wars anymore. But yeah, that's just what I think. What do you guys think? Why do you think the viewership numbers for Ahsoka are so low? Go into the comments down below and let me know, I guess. As somebody who has been a Star Wars fan for like over 25 years, for like almost my whole life since I was a kid, yeah, I've really got to know so many Star Wars fans here in Singapore, and not just in Singapore but like around the world through online forums and all that. And I also know people who run local toy shops here in Singapore, and all of them can tell me the exact moment that Star Wars merchandise sales plummeted, and that was right after The Last Jedi came out. So, you know, I know people can argue all they want about whether The Last Jedi was a good Star Wars movie or not. For me, I'm not even so worried about that. I'm just worried about the Star Wars franchise as a whole. And like right after that movie came out, you really just see people care less about Star Wars. So I really hope Disney can do something to salvage the whole situation. But anyway, those are just my thoughts. Go down into the comments below and let me know what you think. Thanks again for watching, everybody. And as always, stay gold. Bye guys.